Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reading and providing commentary and analysis on an article by the Wall Street Journal on Cuba to host secret Chinese spy base focusing on the United States. So I've heard mixed things about this, about the truthfulness of these claims. But let's just read what the Wall Street Journal has to say and give our opinion on this piece. Beijing agrees to pay Havana several $billion for eavesdropping facilities. Okay. China and Cuba have reached a secret agreement for China to establish an electronic eavesdropping facility on the island. Secret agreement. I guess it's not too big of a secret if we all know about it. I mean, it's in the Wall Street Journal now. Then again, since no one reads the Wall Street Journal anymore, maybe it is a secret still. This is according to officials, blah, 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 White House, etc., etc. Eavesdropping facility in Cuba, roughly 100 miles from Florida. Oh, so like in Florida's backyard, you could see it. You could see it from the coastline. Would allow Chinese intelligence services to scoop up electronic communications throughout the Southeast U.S., where many military bases are located, and monitor U.S. ship traffic. I mean, the United States has done that with other countries in the past. They've installed various military equipment, facilities, things like that in places like Turkey, in places like Greece. There's places in Taiwan right now. I'm in the Philippines. There's military bases in the Philippines. So even if this story was true, which I have a great degree of doubt it is true, but even if it was true, China is well within its rights to do that, unless, of course, we're believing that now countries have a right to a sphere of influence. I mean, if countries have a right to a sphere of influence, then sure, this would be bad for the United States. But we've learned from the Ukraine conflict that places like Russia are not allowed to have a sphere of influence. And if they're not allowed to have a sphere of influence, well, why is the United States allowed to have this sphere of influence? I mean, is it a double standard? Of course it's a double standard. The United States lives and thrives on double standards. What else does this article say? Chinese agreed to pay cash-strapped Cuba several $1 billion. Why is it cash-strapped? It's because it's been sanctioned to high heaven by the United States. Okay. Yeah, United States considers China to be a rival, obviously. A Chinese base with advanced military and intelligence capabilities in the U.S. backyard could be an unprecedented new threat. It's just hilarious that people actually believe this. Like, there are actual people who read this in the Wall Street Journal and are like, yes, we can't have a Chinese base in our backyard. It's a threat to us. And it's like, well, what about Russia's concerns in Eastern Europe? It's like, oh, that's different. They want it there. Well, what about Cuba? Doesn't Cuba want Chinese base there if they're paying for it? I mean, it's just like the complete decoupling from reality that anyone who has believed a Western propaganda has to have. Like, there's just so many contradictions in the Western narrative that with just a little tiny bit of searching, you could figure out these contradictions. But no, Western propaganda victims, they just can't get it. And they're mostly boomers, because no one younger than boomers actually follows the mainstream media. Like, who actually reads the Wall Street Journal? I mean, I'm apparently reading it. I'm suffering through it, and I'm forcing you to suffer through it because you're listening to my commentary on it. But aside from that, no one actually reads this garbage. Report is not accurate, providing any details, blah, blah, blah. Remain confident that we are able to meet our security commitments. Okay, Cuba denies it. A joint statement, top lawmakers of Senate intelligence said Chinese eavesdropping facilities in Cuba would pose a serious threat to our national security and sovereignty, and urged the administration to take action. Well, wait a minute. I thought, like Ukraine, I thought these countries are allowed to just do their own thing. They're sovereign nations. That's what I've been told. I mean, there's no such thing as a sphere of influence. Why do all these senators care? Right? Right? Oh, you have bipartisan Democrats, Republicans, all of them saying, oh, we can't have these sovereign nations make sovereign decisions, autonomous decisions, because they're in our sphere of influence. Does this sound at all familiar to anyone following the Ukraine conflict? I mean, it should. The hypocrisy of this absolutely should. U.S. has intervened before to stop foreign powers from extending their influence in the Western Hemisphere, most notably during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. People forget, but the reason that happened was because United States was moving military assets into places like Turkey, and so there was secret agreements that happened that Soviet Union would move things out of Cuba, United States would move things out of Turkey, and so it's funny. Soviet backed down or removed the missiles. Wow, it's a propaganda way of putting this. Soviets backed down and removed their missiles from Cuba. No, there was an agreement reached that United States would move military equipment, hardware out of places like Turkey, and Soviet Unions would do the same in Cuba. But people forget that there are spheres of influences, and countries do have a right to be threatened by the United States. The United States is a very threatening country. They go to war. They're always at war. Oh, at least they state in this article. A few months later, the U.S. quietly removed intermediate-range ballistic missiles from Turkey that the Soviets had complained about. So there was an agreement, but they're pretending like, oh, the Soviets lost that. No, there was an agreement, obviously. Chinese spy balloons flight. Everyone at this point is admitting that the wind blew it off course, but I mean, the United States does stuff like this all the time. Like, pretending like it was a spy balloon, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, these communication and just a dialogue between the United States and China, it's not going well right now. China just wants nothing to do with the United States because Chinese intelligence is telling China, no matter what you do, United States is going to want a war with you. Because United States cannot allow China to rise. The United States has an existential crisis if there is a actual peer competitor to the United States, because the United States, in its current iteration, cannot continue to exist if there is an alternative model, right? The US sells arms to Taiwan, which China considers a renegade province, and the United States considers it a renegade province too. They consider it a part of China, and the Communist Party of China is considered the official government of China. So yes, it is a renegade province by nearly every country in the world standards. The United States also deploys a small number of troops there to train its military and sail Navy ships through the Taiwan Strait. So exactly like what it's doing in Ukraine, just harassing other countries on the other side of the world. Establishing this facility signals a new escalatory phase in China's broader defense strategy. It's a bit of a game changer. The selection of Cuba is also intentionally provocative. But wait a minute. Sovereign countries are allowed to do what they want. It's not provocative. I mean, the United States has hundreds of bases all across the world. That's not provocative, right? Right? And then we have Guantanamo Bay, where the United States is detaining people unlawfully because they need to do it off of American shores because it's not legal what they're doing there. And so they're doing it in another country in order to circumvent American laws. So that's the American government for you, right? Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So Cuba has been a thorn in the United States' side since it became a communist dictatorship. I love when people pretend like Cuba is a great example of communism and they use it as a caricature of why communism can never work. But then they forget that Cuba is a tiny, tiny country that is being bullied by its much larger neighbor, sanctions against it, embargoes against it, just blockades against it. It's just Cuba has been bullied nonstop. If you want to look at actual peers in terms of a communist system and capitalistic system, why don't you look at countries that are geographically located close to each other that have similar population sizes to each other, such as India and China? Which of those is actually doing better? Is it the capitalistic democratic country or the Chinese model of democracy and the communistic system in China? It's obviously the Chinese system that is doing better than the capitalistic system in India. So, I mean, just silly the types of caricatures used in order to say that communism isn't working. Yeah, we see that Beijing is trying to make alliances with places like Cuba, and it makes complete sense, obviously, because places like Cuba have understood the American aggression for decades. They've faced it. They've figured out alternatives to the American-led international economic system, and we're seeing that all these other countries, Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, all these countries are developing a parallel system. And the more countries that the United States screws over, and the more countries that see how the United States is not a trustworthy partner, the more countries that are actually going to buy into this alternative system. And guess what? The American system cannot survive if it doesn't have these poor producer countries to exploit. Okay? So, good article, interesting article for us to analyze whether it's true or not. Just the type of hypocrisy that you see in this article is just mind-boggling by these Western propagandists. And so if you liked my commentary on this article and like the type of work that I'm doing, please provide a thumbs up for this video and also subscribe to our channel. We're constantly coming up with more content. I obviously always have more things I want to say on topics. I love talking about this. Very, very interesting. If you have a comment for me, whether it's positive or negative, I love reading them, and I love trolling people with negative comments. It's actually a lot of fun for me. So whether it's positive or negative, please leave a comment. Always fun for me. And if you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. I already said that. Anyways, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching. Bye.